we talk about good debt versus bad debt? Because I know on some of your stuff I've watched, you really, really do a great job explaining this.
So I think there's a big difference between good debt and bad debt. So I'm not like Dave Ramsey, where all debt is the devil. There's smart debt to take on. So I mean, you're coming from a commercial real estate background. That was my background as well. You know that your rates of return and your cash on cash returns and your IRRs are way higher when you take on the right amount of leverage, right, aka debt. I would say that good debt is putting money down or borrowing money for something that brings you cash flow or an income, or can actually increase your income in the future, such as taking out a student loan, for example. My wife is a perfect example. She's a nurse. She's a licensed nurse, an RN. She took out a little bit of debt to basically become a nurse practitioner, and those ROIs for the rest of her life is going to be in the, who knows, tens of thousands of percent compared to what that debt was. Now, if you take out a loan to buy, jewelry or something that doesn't bring you money, say you want to buy like a nice purse or a nice clothes or a nice suit, that's probably in the realm of bad debt, right? So there's a big difference there. I would consider or define it very simply as good debt is taking on debt for something that'll actually produce income for you or increase your income over time. Bad debt is typically on consumer purchases, and that's typically the debt that I talk about that should be paid down quickly.
What's your rule of thumb for how much cash reserves you need, and where should people be generally?
Yeah, so I like to think of first things first. So obviously, you need to have a roof over your head. You need to pay your utilities. You need to have transportation in order to get to work if you make an income that way. All those boxes need to be checked first, and then you can start, directing your money in certain buckets. So, say for example, you take home $1,000 a week, just for easy numbers. You know that 300 of those dollars is going to certain things. Utilities, groceries, whatever. Once that base layer is taken care of, then I recommend people start investing in different buckets. So you may have a travel fund or a travel bucket. You may have a savings bucket, an emergency fund bucket. You may have a car fund bucket if you want to save for another car or make a car payment or whatever. So whatever interests you in life, I definitely believe in spending on those things. I don't recommend people go through life as being cheap or being like a miser or like having like where you can't enjoy life basically. Buy a round of drinks for your friends, go eat at a nice restaurant, treat yourself if you're working hard, and as long as you've taken care of those first things first, I highly recommend spending the money, because not completely, but it's meant to be spent. It's meant to be enjoyed as long as you're taking care of all the first things.
Yeah, I know on one of the videos you talked about a way to save money is to get a roommate, and can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think it depends on what stage in life you're at, right? So if you're married with kids and all that stuff, it may not make sense to get a roommate. But the overarching message there was, if you're in the right type or right stage of life, that can really offset your mortgage if you do own the house or the condo, or if you're renting, for example. So some people get sick of roommates by the time they're done with school or college. Some people have them until they're 30s or 40s. I don't know. It's all personal preference. But what I meant by that message was, if you can somehow offset the cost of your mortgage, whether it's by getting a roommate or by house hacking, potentially buying a duplex, living in one half, renting out the other, that's the fastest way to build wealth, in my opinion, is by controlling real estate and reducing your monthly expenses to where you're either paying very, very little for housing expenses or even potentially making money based on having a roommate or a tenant in that duplex.
Yeah, I mentored a kid like this up in Idaho, and that's what he was doing. He was buying homes and then renting out the basement or the rooms above the garage. And
Yeah, it's that principal pay down, and it's also lowering your cost of living, because let's be honest, I think cars and housing is probably the two most expensive outflows of people's money. It's either a mortgage, rent, or a car payment. So if you can knock off one of those and cancel one of those in the form of rent or mortgage payments, I mean, you're going to be able to fill up those buckets that I mentioned earlier much quicker.
I know you're a big proponent of spreadsheets to budget your finances. And I know this is a kind of a discipline thing. A lot of people do not do this. Can you talk a little bit about that and why you think this is important?
Yeah, so I'm of two schools, and I feel like I'm talking out both sides of my mouth here. But I feel like the people that are disciplined enough to have the spreadsheet and be able to maintain it and keep it up, they kind of nerd out on that, and I'm one of those people. I like it; it's fun. It's a way to kind of keep track of my stuff. It's almost like physical exercise. Calories in, calories out. What workouts am I doing? What have I done over time? I think the spreadsheets are great for people who are going to use them. However, I don't think they're great for most people because I feel like people don't have the discipline to keep up with it unless they're really, nerding out on it or using it as their hobby. So I think it's great because what gets measured gets managed and you can visualize, oh, okay, I didn't realize I was spending so much money on, coffee or, whatever, eating out or whatever the case may be. But I think once you can visualize everything, you can really start to understand your habits as a person better. But for the people that don't like spreadsheets, what I recommend is just getting that baseline of really understanding your income coming in every month and understanding, the ballpark of the expenses per month, and then understanding to invest that difference. So I think there's both types of people can win. If you like the spreadsheets, great. If you don't, look at more like the big picture, if that makes sense.
So now we're talking about budgets. What are some of the best apps that you like to refer to people and give people to manage their finances?
Yeah, if you can set it up yourself and you know what you're doing, just a simple, Google sheet that's in the cloud, you can always update it and access it anywhere. So just Google Drive. But if you like the actual apps themselves, what I've used in the past is Mint. Mint is always good, like MINT, like the mint leaf. And then also youneedabudget.com. YNAB is also very good. Those two I haven't used as much. I used to use them more in college and in my early 20s. But ever since then, I kind of started doing my own thing on Google. And if you're disciplined enough to do that, I would recommend any of those three.
So when you were doing that, obviously the apps, kind of came out and they're getting better and better and better, by the way.
Yeah.
What did that data show you? Like, what did you learn? Because it's, a lot of people, it takes discipline to put all that in there. But then from there, when it's all in there, what were some light bulbs that went off when you put all that stuff in?
Yeah, I didn't realize I was spending as much money on going out to eat as I did. It just feels like one of those things that you grab real quick throughout the day, but that stuff really does add up. The smaller stuff is just, here and there. The smaller stuff's not really going to move the needle. But once you start seeing, multiple hundreds of dollars for going out to eat or, whatever it is, then you really start to make conscious decisions in person thinking like, oh, I didn't realize I spent this much money on, X, whether it's, Chipotle or, a restaurant or whatever. So you kind of start to scale back those things if you're really trying to save money. So yeah, I think going out to eat is the one that I didn't realize I was doing that much of.